Hi, this is Sergeant Betsy Brantner Smith with the National Police Association, and this is the National Police Association podcast. I have with me a really, really special guest today, and I wanted to bring her to you because she's going to talk about a case that is ongoing in the criminal justice system here in the United States. And as we frequently talk about at the National Police Association, there are police officers that are being indicted, that have been prosecuted, and some are in prison for simply doing their job. And this is one of those cases, and we want to make sure that everybody knows about this case, knows what they can do to help, and is aware of it as it continues to work its way through the system. Barbara Oldrati, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So you are the wife of a cop. You are the mom of a cop. You have all kinds of relatives that are police officers, and you're an educator, that's pretty typical. Cops and teachers and nurses, we're all those same kind of people that are out there. You're just trying to serve the public, do your job, live your life. And your son got involved in a situation, a very typical situation, where he answered a 911 call where there was supposedly people breaking in. There was a man with a gun. And this really turned your whole family's life upside down. And we're going to talk about that. But first of all, just tell me about your son, Salvador.
So Salvatore always wanted to be a police officer from a little boy. He would, watch TV shows, not the fake ones, like, the real ones. He would do research. He would always dress up like a police officer. With my husband being in the SWAT unit, we would take him to his headquarters and show him the trucks and all the equipment. He just never strayed from the path from a small child of wanting to be a police officer. And then at the age of 14, he was able to get into the Philadelphia Police Explorers here, where he was able to train, do scenarios, classroom training. And then when he was 18 years old, he graduated high school. He moved to New Jersey with my parents and became a Special One law enforcement officer for Gloucester Township. And then from there, at the age of 19, became a cop in Camden, New Jersey, one of the most dangerous cities. And then he was in Camden for a few years, and then he was able to get an opportunity for better pay, more room for moving up in the system, so to speak. And he became a police officer in Mantua Township, New Jersey. And he made VFW Officer of the Year. He received another life-saving award. Many drug stops. He was involved in many incidents where people were armed with weapons and had weapons in the car. Never fired upon them, never took out his gun. Guns are a police officer's tool. Sometimes you need to pull them out. Sometimes you need to use them as appropriately, reasonably. And he always did that. He always made sure he did the best that he could each and every day, and was well loved by the community and his police buddies and the township and the department, everyone. So he was in Mantua probably about a year or 2 years before the critical incident happened back in September of 2021.
Right, September 21st, 2021. Salvatore and another officer get a call. It's a 911 call. It's a distraught guy, and he's claiming that there's a man or two men and a woman. He kind of changes that a little bit. They're breaking into his shed. He even says on the 911 call that he goes, well, I have a 45 that my grandfather gave me, and I don't know I don't know what I can do with it. So I'm throwing quarter sticks at them. That means big firecrackers. And it's a typically strange call that your average patrol cop gets. And
Right.
and he responded to that call with another officer, didn't he?
He did, and they don't have the computer system in the car, so they're not getting the updates. What they know is they're reporting to a burglary in progress. There's a man that is armed. That's all they know. They don't know that the homeowner has a gun. That was not relayed to them. All they know is a burglary in progress at this address that they're headed to, and there's an armed man. That's
So that, as a police officer, tells me that while I'm on my way to that call, I'm at the highest level of awareness, right? Burglary in progress, man with a gun. And again, your son, he was no rookie. He had been to in many situations, well-trained guy, and so he goes to this call only having that information that you spoke about. Tell us what happened then.
so when the first officer pulls up, Corporal Layton pulls up to the man's house. The man is outside of his house and he's on an open line with 911. When Officer Layton, Corporal Layton pulls up, he puts down his passenger side window and he is met with Mr. Sharp pointing a gun right at him
The
through the passenger
suspect.
side. Right in the window. Um, Officer Layton cannot get to his weapon because it's wedged between the seats, and he's a larger guy, and he's shocked that this has happened. So he immediately pulls up a few houses, and you hear on the 911 call, the 911 operator says, "Are you speaking to my officers?" And you hear Corporal Layton say, "Put down the weapon or drop the weapon," and you hear the car vroom, speed up and to get out of way. My son is coming behind him. He starts to get out of the car, but gets back in the car because he sees the corporal pulling away. Now, remember, it's 1:30 a.m. It's low light conditions. It's dark. He sees Mr. Sharper, the suspect, extend his arm, but doesn't see the weapon in his arm at that time or in his hand at that time. So he's now following his corporal, thinking, we're going after the bad guys. They told us they're going this way. I'm following my corporal. When the corporal stops, Salvatore stops. The corporal gets out of the car. Salvatore gets out of the car. And he says, he's got a gun. He's got a gun. Where? My son says, who's got a gun? He says, right there, right there. He's got a gun. Drop the gun. So you can see in the 911 call that my son comes around the car and then ducks back. He says, wanted to make sure that that was a weapon in his hand. And he had the weapon up at a 90-degree angle by his hip. And he was pointing it at my son. So my son, in fear of his life, right? Because action time is different than reaction time.
Mhm.
He engages him. Um, then he continues to flail on the ground. You hear my son as he approaches him, moves up a little bit, says, "Stop reaching, stop reaching." Once he notices that the weapon is no longer in his hand, because that man is still a threat, he can shoot from the ground. Once he realizes he's not a threat anymore, then they move in. The weapon is now there at the bottom near his feet, and they now begin life-saving measures, as my son does. My son gets the medic bag out of the car and begins putting the chest seals on him. Because remember, this is still an active scene. They're still looking for other people. So now other officers are arriving, checking the scene, getting things roped off, checking the house. They still are looking for two more suspects, but at the time, they still don't know it's the homeowner. They know they have a suspect in custody that has a weapon, which they were told from the report from the operator or dispatch.
Right. So this whole situation, of course, goes on, and your son, of course, once you're involved in a shooting, there's some protocol that takes place, and ultimately there's an investigation.
Right. So in New Jersey, the New Jersey Attorney General's office has their own shooting response team, the New Jersey Police Shooting Response Team, do the investigations for transparency. It was taken out of the local prosecutor's hands in each county for transparency. So the Attorney General's shooting response team investigates. They turn the report over to a representative from the Attorney General's office, and they sit down with everyone involved, the chief, the captain, and they go over, the findings. And basically, that while this was a tragic shooting, because it's tragic, someone lost their life, wasn't a perfect shooting, but there was nothing criminal here. But all shootings, thanks to progressive movement in New Jersey, has to go in front of a grand jury. But the attorney general also has a stipulation that if there's enough evidence, they do not have to put it in front of the grand jury. So he was cleared very quickly to return to work. And as you know, as a police officer, if there was anything remotely suspicious or anything that my son did was incorrect, he would have not have been permitted to go back to work. He would have been put on the shelf until the grand jury investigation or the grand jury happened.
Right. And in fact, he went back to work. He went back to patrol, got another award, Police Officer of the Year again, and he got promoted to corporal, right?
Studied hard and became corporal, right? Because this was his life. This job was his life. And he was cleared very quickly. Once he was cleared to return to work, he had to go through protocol. He had to, requalify. He had to get cleared through the doctors and everything they had to go through. And he was cleared within the month. He was cleared altogether, but from the Attorney General's office within like 2 weeks, he was cleared to go back to work. So he was cleared pending, obviously they has to go through the grand jury, but again, they reassured him that this was a justified shooting. A man pointed a gun at one officer, pointed a gun at the other officer, and, New Jersey law supports everything that I'm speaking about. So while I'm here speaking as a mother for my son, I'm not speaking on my opinion. I'm speaking on the facts of the discovery, which we have, and the facts of the case. Once they investigated this shooting, he didn't violate the department's use of force. He didn't violate the New Jersey use of force policy. And he wasn't didn't and there was no departmental violations, nothing, because he acted in accordance to his job. So once he was cleared, and then they did the other investigation, they found high levels of methamphetamine, cocaine, and other drugs in the decedent's system. When they interviewed the neighbors said he was acting erratically that evening. He went over to the house across the street to a young man's house who the young man said, let the police handle it. They're breaking in. Um, he saw the gun. He feared for his life. He took his family into the basement because he was throwing these quarter sticks of dynamite. They didn't know if it was gunshots or what it was that was happening.
And there was no burglary in progress, right?
So, and that's the other thing. And I know a lot of people, there's a lot of trolls. Oh, they were breaking it. They were not. The
Right.
findings of the investigation, the facts of the investigation was this man, and was he high, so high that he hallucinated? It could be, but he has a history of um, drug substance, and definitely alcohol. His truck was equipped with a breathalyzer. He couldn't start his vehicle until he blew into the vehicle. Um, the the main thing that was with this was this man's weapons were taken from him years prior for prior suicidal attempts. Now, when he says, I don't know what I can do with the weapon, he is also a veteran. So he was trained in the military how to use a weapon. And he was also trained that you don't point weapons at people unless you're prepared to be fired upon and or to use it. So, he had a lot of demons. I'm not here to talk ill will of him. My heart goes out to them. But this man was suicide by police, in my opinion. And the findings that we have support this. For example, his ex wife, to whom she has a son with, called, asked to speak to the detective the very next day. And the first thing she said was, he did this. We have a very good relationship. It is what it is. We're divorced. But I know he did this. He's been suicidal too many times to count. She has a notebook. She has um, video of him when he was so drunk on the lawn. Um, Too many times to count. He's been in and out of rehab. He cut his wrists. He was suicidal before they got married. So once he was cleared from the initial investigation of the actual facts and laws, when you bring all this into it, this man just had a lot of demons, faked a 911 call, and the end result was he lost his life, unfortunately. But now, after 20 months of my son, was cleared to go back to work, they bring it in front of the grand jury. At this time, a new attorney general has come in, a left progressive, you know, not worried about the cops. And they bring this in front of a grand jury. And again, it's supposed to be of your peers, but are they really, if you don't know the laws and the rules and, are they your peers? Nobody knows what I do from day to day. I don't know what you do from day to day. Um, in fact, even in the actual fact documentation from the grand jury, they charged him with one count of reckless manslaughter, which doesn't even fit. It's an upcharge. How is that reckless? He didn't know that this was the homeowner. He didn't know that the homeowner did all these drugs that evening. He's pulling up to a scene where there's a man with a gun as per the call that came out.
And also per the other responding officer.
Right. So reckless doesn't even fit.
Mm-hmm.
But, this is what they want to do. They want to try this in the public's opinion to get people to go, oh, here's another cop. Do it. Officers are allowed to act reasonably when their life is in danger. And they have a weapon and they have a tool. That's their weapon. And they have to use it sometimes. Is it pleasant? No. But that is a part of their job to do that. Now, that's the reckless facts right there. Now, there's also self-defense from New Jersey. Self-defense exonerates a person who uses force in a reasonable belief that such actions was necessary to prevent his death or serious injury or death or serious injury to a third person through his belief that was later proven mistaken. Accordingly, the law requires only a reasonable, not necessarily a correct judgment. So when he sees the gun being pointed at him, and the officer there telling him there's a gun, he's in fear of his life.
Mm-hmm.
He is protected under that law. Again, reasonably. And then the New Jersey law states that waiting until a weapon is used on you is not required for self-defense. An individual can have an honest and reasonable belief he was in danger that required the use of deadly force if a party banished a weapon or otherwise threatened him. In other words, a person does not have to wait for someone to use a weapon before he can use deadly force and be justified in doing so. So they charged him on something that he is justified by the laws of New Jersey, not opinion, not my opinion as a mother, not opinion as someone who doesn't like police officers. This is the law that he is protected under, and he acted reasonably in fear of his life. You hear him on his body cam footage, and he says, I thought he was going to effing shoot me.
Mm-hmm.
The other officer thought he said Officer Oldrati at that time, he wasn't corporal, saved my life. He gives the statement. He's so distraught because he's just in shock.
Right.
Trauma of having a gun pointed at his head. And when people say, oh, that didn't happen, it absolutely happened. We have the facts, we have the discovery, we have the laws that support him. How are we here? We're here because this is politically motivated by the Office of the OPIA in New Jersey.
Tell people what that is.
So it's the Office of Public Integrity and Accountability, and it's the division within the Attorney General's office who investigates these police shootings and such other criminal acts. So the kicker comes last March when the head, Tom Eicher, so-called steps down, retires, but all of a sudden, all around all this prosecutorial misconduct, they're doing the same thing to several other cases in New Jersey that these cases have been dropped or judges have thrown them out and or are still pending because they're withholding important evidence. The grand jury, they have all, it's a packet. Here, look it over. Here's the basic facts. Everything I just read to you, they read to the grand jury. Well, how could you find him guilty and or there was, it's not guilty, it's, is there enough evidence?
Yeah, enough to indict. Yeah.
Right? Enough to indict. But you can indict a ham sandwich
Mhm.
because the level is so low to indict. And this is what they're doing. They're throwing whatever they can at the wall to see what sticks. And this is
So,
what
so
that's
your son got indicted
he did.
for
He was
this
indicted,
shooting.
correct,
And
20 months after he was cleared.
right,
He was indicted May 23rd, 2023. We
right. So
were
he gets indicted,
indicted.
arrested, charged, and tell us where the case is from there.
So on May 23rd, 2023, we knew it was going to the grand jury, but all of the prosecutors that were involved in the case through this one and that one said, we've had conversations about this case. This is not an indictable case because this was a justified shooting protected under the laws. This is just a formality to show transparency. But when they present the case, of course, they, you know, just give a little bit of tidbits. They never tell them that my son was cleared to go back to work, that he's been working. They never talk about the ex-wife's statement that this man's been suicidal and had a lot of drugs in his system and had a past because it's supposed to be about what my son knew. My son didn't know that at the time. He knows he's just pulling up. So he's indicted. We have to turn him in to jail. He has to be reported. In fact, one of the state police, they would have to walk him into jail. They refused to walk him in. They said, this is not right what they're doing. This is a justified shooting. We were fortunately able to get him out after a day. He doesn't know that he's getting out when he goes in front of the judge, but we were able to get him out. And then now we began the process of the fact finding and check-in dates at court. And here we are, you know, almost 2 years later, and we're just awaiting information to go to trial. We're in the process right now. The Attorney General wants to get our use of force expert thrown out. He's extremely talented and has a long list, a great resume, but they can't find a use of force person to go against. Who are you going to find to go against the laws? Who acting reasonably?
Right.
Who are you going to find to lie on the stand to say what he did was reckless? Well, I tell you who was reckless. The 911 operator was reckless because he didn't tell Mr. Sharp to stay in
Mhm.
in the residence. They didn't report that the homeowner was outside. I know things go fast, things go quickly. I'm not here to judge. Mr. Sharp was reckless. He inhaled a whole bunch of drugs. However, he took the drugs. He had a weapon that he knew was inoperable because it was a replica, because they have taken his real guns because of suicidal ideations and he was put away, for suicide. But the thing about the replica was, so a replica is different than a toy. So a replica looks exactly like a real
Mhm. Mhm.
gun, loaded with a magazine, with bullets. The only difference was that my husband explains to me is the pin was removed.
Right.
The pin was in, it could have been, but
Right. But
Mr.
again, the
Sharp,
officer doesn't know any of
right.
that. Yeah.
And Mr. Sharp knew what he needed to do to get the officers to shoot
Sure.
at him. I'm going to point
Absolutely.
I'm going to point it at one, and then I'm going to point it at the other. At that
Yeah.
time, he could drop that weapon. He could have went back into the house. He could have said, "No, wait, it's not real." He could have did all of those things, but he chose, as soon as the officer pulled up, he chose to meet them right there at the curb and point that weapon at the one corporal. And right now we're waiting. We're waiting for trial. Um,
Your
and
son, in the meantime, can't do the job he loves, the
he was
job he has wanted to do his whole life, right?
suspended without pay. Lost his insurance, getting ready. He was indicted and a lot in May 2023, was getting married in September 2023. So now he
Mhm.
has a wife and now they have a baby. So now we're paying insurance out of our pocket.
Right.
We have great support. We're very blessed. But it's the insurance that we're all doing our best to help him out with.
Right. Absolutely. This
Just
is,
wait.
yeah. So this case is rolling toward trial, correct?
I mean, that's what they tell us. We're preparing for trial, of course, at any time. Um, I don't know how they're going to put a trial on. What are you going to say? But they can lie. They've lied.
Yeah.
Lied because now with and I've sent so many articles. Every week there's a new article coming out about the OPIA and the prosecutorial misconduct. And there's senators in New Jersey, and I've reached out to their offices who are calling for this attorney general to step down because of these frivolous charges, because of this prosecutorial misconduct. New Jersey's a mess, and the governor and the AG are about to find out because Alina Habba now just came out last week and is opening an investigation because they're telling the state police don't aid ICE. These are mandates from the president. These are documents that executive orders. Who are you to go against these from the president of the United States? I mean, listen, I'm glad they're doing this because I want them to go in there and I want them to revamp this whole state. The people of New Jersey deserve better. The police officers deserve better. We're so quick to judge these officers, but they're the only ones that wake up every day and know in their mind, other than the military and a few other positions or jobs where you might not come home. You might have
Mhm.
to take a life, or save a life that day. And yes, are there bad seeds? There in every profession. There's bad seeds. Take care of the ones that are not doing and following the rules. But officers that are using reasonable force, that they're just so disrespected and spoke to so horribly. That this is not a case of police brutality. That's not what we're talking about. That's a separate issue. Handle that separately. This was a case of a justified shooting, tragic as it is, but now all the lives are affected. That little boy lost his father's life, lost their life.
Mhm.
His father lost his father. I mean, it's tragic. I've lost my son in a way because he's suffering with PTSD. He's never going to be able to go back and do this job. This is all he ever wanted to do, and he was good at it. And we're just right now stuck in limbo. And like I said, I've reached out to senators. I've sent letters to the White House, to the DOJ, to Alina Habba. I'm just looking for people to get our story to them and, put pressure on these corrupt politicians who hide behind their mask of, oh, we're doing justice and we're going after the bad cops. You're not going after the bad cops. You know,
Absolutely. And that's why we wanted to talk to you, because this the New Jersey Attorney General is an activist. He allegedly has a lot of other issues that are being investigated right
yeah.
now. He needs to clean his own house. And in the meantime, your family is just trying to, tread water, move toward an appropriate ending to this. Because you're right. I don't see how they could ever take this case to trial. And that's why we want people to know. We want you to go on YouTube. You can watch the body cam. You can read articles about this. And I will say that the press, especially the press in New Jersey, a lot of the headlines that you see about your son's officer involved shooting is, cop pulls up and shoots veteran. And the press has been very lazy in the
It can.
way that they
It
have
can.
described
Well,
and investigated the drug
right.
addict who called 911. And they've been very lazy and inappropriate in a lot of these articles in the way they portrayed your son.
Oh, and the media in general should be ashamed of themselves
Yes.
because that's what they do. They go with the narrative. There is no investigative reporting anymore because
Yeah.
Channel 6, Channel 3, Channel 10, if you would have went and investigated it and listen, I have the ex-wife's statement. I have her audio statement.
Mm-hmm.
Fireside America podcast we were on, they aired it. Minute 44. You can go to Fireside America podcast with Ryan Robbins. plays her 18-minute audio of this.
Mm-hmm.
The laws, Officer Tatum, he did a segment on it. He went over just the facts of the
Yes.
law. Everything supports what he did. People might not like it. I don't like it. My son doesn't like that he had to take somebody's life.
No cop wakes up and says, "Oh, I hope I get to shoot somebody today." No
Right.
one likes being involved in an officer-involved shooting.
But, they said, oh, he pulled up within 5 seconds. No, that's a lie, because the Comm Center, the podcast, they did a whole show on my son's body cam and the 911 footage last May, even before we knew him, even before my husband and I started doing podcasts and reaching out. We got a hold of them in November, and they had us on their show. And they said the same thing, like, officers have a split-second decision, and nobody knows what that's like unless you're in it. And I just sent you a link to a YouTube video where a news report did that. They went out and they investigated how police officers can change in a split second. 1 minute, they're crossing kids at a school, or they're doing things, and the next minute they could be in the battle for their life.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
a split-second decision. And as long as it follows the laws and reasonable, this should not even be an issue. But when you have people pushing a narrative of the attorney general and these left progressives, okay, and they're people that don't support police, this is what you get. You get, oh, he pulled up in 5 seconds. No, it was more like he had like 15 seconds to put the gun down. He chose
Right.
not to put the gun down. He did not follow commands. If he would have followed commands, he would have been alive and we wouldn't be in this situation. And to top it all off, if he lived, he would have been charged with assault on police,
Yes.
pointing a gun, having paraphernalia in his house, illegal drugs. He would have been charged. But because we're playing this emotion and not supporting police and not following the facts and the laws, this is where we are.
Yeah,
I'm so
absolutely.
infuriated that this is happening, not just to my son. Today it's my son. Tomorrow it's your sons or daughters. This is happening all over the country.
Yeah.
Where are these leaders? Who's going to step up? I'm getting fired up, Betsy. I'm sorry. This,
We
I,
love that.
these people, and the trolls. Oh, the trolls. Oh, yeah, he just pulled up. He unleashed on that guy. You have
Yeah.
no idea what you're talking about. Go and do the simulations where it's either shoot or be shot. In fact, you go ride with the police in the most corrupt.
And that's
Yeah.
one of the things we always suggest. Go on a ride along. Go
Oh,
join a Citizen Police Academy. Go do that
educate yourself.
simulation. Absolutely. And you're absolutely right. This travesty of justice could be any cop out there, and it could be your kid, your neighbor, your spouse. And that's why, Barbara, we wanted to bring you on. I know that you've got a Give Send Go account to help with legal expenses and things like that. And then also the National Center for Police Defense has taken on Salvatore's case too. Am I
Yes.
right?
They have, and in both the Give, Send, Go, and with the National Police, they have a write-up of all factual information,
Correct.
facts over feelings. Not my opinion. It's not my opinion because he's my son. These are facts of the case. These are the laws that support him. These are the facts of the case. And I hope they come into New Jersey and they clean it up, because it is so corrupt to the core. And people need to start waking up, and people, oh no, that's not happening. Oh, it's happening. It's been
Absolutely.
happening. We just haven't been made aware of it. And that's why, I continue to go on, and my husband and I speak up to all these different podcasts, and thankful for the people that have us, because it's about the truth. This is not about
Yes.
what you think he should have done, or what I hoped he would have done, or this is the facts of the case, reasonable use of deadly force. And that's what it was, and unfortunate that it may be.
Well, and that's why we wanted to have you on. And Barbara, we cannot thank you enough for being on with us today. And if you'd like more information about the National Police Association, you can visit us at nationalpolice.org.
Every day, the brave men and women of law enforcement put their lives on the line to keep us safe. But they need our help to continue their mission. Activist politicians, progressive prosecutors, the ACLU, and the rest of the anti-police forces, receive millions in donations from extremist pro-criminal elements like George Soros and woke corporations. The National Police Association is fighting them in courts around the country, including the United States Supreme Court, defending officers who are being attacked for doing their jobs. Additionally, the National Police Association works year-round to pass tough-on-crime legislation to put and keep criminals behind bars. Consider going to nationalpolice.org and donating to keep us in the fight. Together we can win. That is nationalpolice.org.